Hello everyone, so today I'm going to talk about some books that I read in the second half of 2017 that I absolutely loved. If the year were a seesaw, the second half would always be on the floor. It was by far the busiest part of my year, and there was so much going on that I didn't get as much time to read as I wanted. So when I read a book that I absolutely loved, it meant even more to me because it felt like it was such a precious use of that time that I had, the little time that I had. So there are 4 books, 2 of them I actually read this week, and in addition to being books I really enjoyed, these books also have some of the best covers that I saw this year. The first one I want to talk about that I was really excited for was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. All of the earliest contemporary adult fiction that I read growing up was about suburban America. However, until I read this, I realized that it was all pretty much written by men and had a very male gaze in all of the writing. Little Fires Everywhere is about a suburb in Cleveland, Ohio, Shaker Heights. A well-off family there own another property in the community and let it out to people that they decide are worthy of it. Into that second property move Pearl, a young teenage girl, and her artist mother, Mia, who takes photographs and manipulates them in different ways. For me, this was one of those novels where I kept finding the title in different parts of the story. It wasn't a title that I forgot about or that I came back to at the very end. It was a title that stuck with me as I read every single chapter. What were the little fires in Shaker Heights, in the families, and in the US? And coming back to the cover for a second, which looks like a model town, to whom are the fires little? I thought of the fires in a literal sense, and I thought of the fires as orange lights on in a property, as you can see on the cover here. That concoction of little worlds inside, other people's experiences that you don't quite know, and knowledge traded as currency in the way that it is in suburbia. The case itself is also beautiful, with a CN for Celeste Ng on it. I bought this book the moment it came out. My bank balance was actually quite low, but I knew that I wanted to make that time for myself to read it, and I'm very glad I did. When I was on the book tour, I had the opportunity to meet so many wonderful booksellers and drop in on a couple of brilliant indie bookshops, including Mitzi's in Sioux Falls, I believe, and also the Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana, which is where I bought Homefire, which has, I think, my cover of the year, 100%. Homefire is a contemporary retelling of the story of Antigone, focusing on one family, the siblings in one family, and also all those who come into contact with them or have history with them. It's a story about how we're seen, who we assign rights to, and also who has control over the story told about our personhood and our body. It's set in various countries, the US, the UK, Syria, Pakistan, and for me was another one of those examples of a story when you grow a lot of sympathy for someone and you really see something from their perspective, and then the narrative shifts, the dialogue shifts perspective, and in that rising action you see someone else's perspective of it and you start to feel empathy for them. Naturally, your head is trying to work out, well, what's reality and who's right here, but that's not entirely the point here. It's showing how lots of different people can contribute to certain environments and also attitudes, but also the ways in which we can push back against that and the ways in which we can see each other with a level of generosity while also accepting maybe that there are some absolute truths or absolute kindnesses or absolute basic rights that we need to extend to each other. That perspective, however, might also be indicative of my mindset when I was reading it. I did love how much of it took place in London because obviously that's my home and that's what I know really well, and the kind of social environment that it was talking about and also media environment was very familiar to me and felt very real to me. It's not a debut. Kamala Shamsi has written various other books and I look forward to reading them because I did really, really enjoy this. And then also, of course, the cover is absolutely beautiful. It meant lots of different things to me, but one of the things looking at it with a British eye that I couldn't help but seeing was a Wars of the Roses kind of formation. What's the War of the Roses of our era? The jacket art was by Ben Denzer and the lettering was by Grace Hahn. And then on the underside of it, there's this lovely pattern as well. So it's a very beautiful book. I of course realise that I'm showing off all of these beautiful books just after many of you will have given presents, but hopefully lots of you received book tokens this Christmas. Keeping things on the contemporary Britain track, this book actually came out in 2016 and I only read it this week, and that's Autumn by Ali Smith. I have not yet read Winter. If I had infinite time, I would rush out and get that now, but my TBR pile is out of control and I really want to read through it before I move back. Ali Smith writes in a very postmodern style, and I think for a lot of people, they've had a lot of buzz about her and then they pick up a book and they'll be kind of confused by it or off-put by it. And when you're reading it outside of, for example, a book club or a, classroom lecture environment, then sometimes it's hard because you don't really have as many people to talk to about it. If you have ever tried to read an Ali Smith book and thought, actually, it's a bit much for me, I'd encourage you to try Autumn, because it is written in a slightly different style, even though you have all of those similar images of historical art and hopping between times and dialogue that sometimes you mistake as the run of the text because of the way it's all set out. So this is contemporary to the world after Brexit, but in many ways it's not about that. It's about the relationship between a girl and her very old neighbour, who, after she's asked to do a project in which you go to your neighbour's house and ask them questions about their life, she becomes very good friends with. He becomes this educator in her life. He talks to her in other ways from the people in her life, asks her to see the world in a different perspective. But then also, as time flashes forward, we find that he's very ill and not saying anything at all. I love the smooth jump between times as always, and the commentary about artists and whose art we choose to prize. I really love this book. It might actually be my favourite Ali Smith now. I first read The Accidental. My friend Jazz at school gave it to me for my 15th birthday, I think, and that was a big moment for me. But I really, really loved Autumn and cannot wait to read Winter. Quick cover situation. It has this lovely kind of half cover with this beautiful illustration of a path, of an autumnal path. Underneath it has that classic cloth-bound book and the debossed text. In the front, it has just a plain tealish, but on the back page is this piece of pop art by the pop artist Pauline Botti called The Only Blonde in the World. And as I'm looking to confirm that, I just saw that obviously this is a David Hockney. It's called Early November Tunnel. That should have been very obvious to me, but so it goes. The final book I want to talk about is another book I read just this week, and it's called Swimmer Among the Stars by Kanishk Thoreau. And it's a collection of short stories. I really like short stories, but my favourite short stories are by Jorge Luis Borges, who writes the most amazing, complicated, weird short stories of all. And this, for me, had a little bit of that Borgesian feeling. This book was originally published in 2016 in India and was published for the first time in 2017 here. Each story is very different from the last one. Some of them have kind of comical, satirical takes. Others were very fable-like. Like they were going into the past and adopting that tone, but also infusing it with something very new. There are 13 different stories. My 3 favourite stories were the very first one, Swimmer Among the Stars, which is about an old woman who's visited by ethnographers who are trying to take down recordings of her as the last speaker of the language that she speaks. No matter how innovative she is with her language, it does not have the force to take possession of an idea. In later years, they will say that her term, Swimmer Among the Stars, means astronaut. They will never say that astronaut means swimmer among the stars. Whose language means what, and in what direction does that exchange flow, I thought was so brilliantly expressed in that story. Looking back at these titles, I really want to name more than this, but I loved A United Nations in Space, which is literally about the ambassadors for the United Nations on board a spaceship looking down at Earth and finding out their news secondhand, but also being in arrears to this hotel spaceship entity and not knowing whether they're going to be able to go back to Earth and have a new base, the United Nations. But everyone is referred to in the context of their country. So it's a lot of like Mexico spoke to Luxembourg and Luxembourg spoke to Kazakhstan. A lot of what was being described was actually tremendously sad. And then another one that I really loved was Portrait with Coal Fire, which was a conversation between a photojournalist and the subject of a photograph. The subject of the photograph, the coal miner, has been published in a magazine, and it's interesting as the conversation unfolds to see the coal miner come to an understanding of kind of how he's been used in that photograph, and also getting across that to the photojournalist who makes excuses and also speaks to reality of his position, but then also is a level of defensive about the way they've operated in this situation and all that they've done for this person. But yes, I thought the collection overall was wonderful. I thought the cover again was absolutely beautiful. Swimmer Among the Stars was obviously from that first story that I read the excerpt from, but also this elephant is from another beautiful story called The Elephant at Sea, which is about this elephant that has to be moved from 2 different countries and ends up going on a boat and loves life on the boat. So there's lots and lots in here, and if you're looking to get back into reading, you haven't read as much maybe as you'd like to in 2017, then I always think that picking up a short story collection is a really good way to do it, because you can say to yourself, I'm just going to read one story today, and the next day I'm going to read another story today, and it's not a massive suck up of your time, but these stories are also very, very worth reading. So that's it from me. I'm hoping to be making another video tomorrow, but who knows? I would love to hear your thoughts and comments, whether you've read these books or not, and I'd be curious to know what some of your favourite books to read were in 2017. That was a really strange sentence. All right, see you tomorrow, probably. Bye.